Hey everybody, it's Alex once again from the Remote Work Life Podcast. Today I have with me Corine Tan, who is the founder of Kona. Now, I've been trying to get Corine on the podcast for a while because I know what she has to offer in terms of not just her own experience, but also her company Kona. I know what she has to offer is something that's really important especially to remote teams. And she's been very busy over the last couple of years building Kona. She's the co-founder of Kona, which is a wellness platform for remote teams. And since January 2020, Corine has interviewed 550 plus remote managers, unbelievable, about their experiences and compiled their interviews in an extensive report. I'm going to link to that in the show notes. She writes and speaks regularly on emotional intelligence and empathetic remote leadership, something that we need right now. And her work has been featured in Yahoo, Entrepreneur, TechCrunch, Harvard Business Review, Forbes, BuiltIn, and more. I mean, some of the prominent press there. So, Corine, thank you so much for joining us today on the Remote Work Life Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the awesome, super rad introduction. I couldn't have done it better myself.
Well, listen, Kona and you are awesome, super and rad, so had to have the introduction that sort of is in line with that. And today, we're going to talk about how empathy powers remote teams. And I think that's just the bedrock of remote work in general. Empathy is just coursing through the veins of everybody, I think, who works remotely, or most people anyway. What we'll do, we'll cover some key takeaways from Corine's 550, I still can't believe that, 550 plus remote manager interviews. Empathy's impact on team performance and tips for creating an unbelievable or unbeatable culture on your remote team. We all need that. We all need that. But before we get into that, Corine, I always start by, I always want to find out about the person behind the business, behind the team. So, and from our sort of previous sort of conversation, I get the feeling that you didn't quite expect to be where you are now. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Did you see yourself in your current role? And tell us how you got here.
I love this question just because I feel like me and many other people, I always had kind of set idea of who works in tech. And as a result, I never saw myself working in tech. I majored in English at UCLA. For clarification, I'm 21 years old, recently graduated from that. I came in wanting to basically do film. I wanted to be a film producer. I wanted to figure out how to get movies on the big screen. That was my main goal going into school. And halfway through, I just realized I could not stand the egos. The egos on student film crews. I do not have to explain further. It was just something that just was really unbearable for me. And I really wanted to be part of a team that was highly collaborative, highly innovative. And tech seemed like the next best thing, but it seemed like a complete 180 turn. And so I was lucky enough to encounter LA Hacks. It's a club on campus that runs one of the biggest hackathons in California. That's where I met my co-founder, Andrew. We were leading the marketing team together. And right after the event wraps, a 48-hour kind of whirlwind of hackers and tech and kind of encountering a ton of really cool startups and ideas and such. I just came away super motivated, but not really sure where to go next. And literally the next day, Andrew presents me saying, hey, my entrepreneur frat friend, Sid, is starting a startup that's trying to add a more human element to work. And we need somebody who can write. We need a marketing person. So would you be open to having a conversation with Sid? At the time, I was like, no way. I don't want more responsibilities. I'm trying to graduate from UCLA early. This is the last thing I need. But one conversation with Sid and I was hooked. The idea of adding a more personal element, a more kind of happier element, at the time, it definitely helped that I had a terrible boss that I was working for the kind of tutoring company that I was at. So immediately I was on board, I was hooked, and the rest is really history. We dove into kind of, actually the rest is history, but I'll get into it in a little bit because there's definitely a lot of hiccups along the way, a lot of discoveries, and it's kind of put us where we are now.
I think it's a brilliant story, and I think it just kind of exemplifies that you need to have an open mind when it comes to your career and the different journeys and the different pathways it can take you down. I think lots of people think, okay, it's a straight journey from here to there, and it's not quite like that. And we're all the better for having you, Corine, because this, and we're going to talk about Kona as well. It's very much needed, especially in the world of remote work. And I'm sure, because you've been working so hard over the past couple of years, and I've sensed that through the conversations that you've been sharing on LinkedIn and from our previous conversation as well. You've been working hard. It still blows my mind, 550 plus interviews. But what for you has been the biggest challenge you've had to overcome to contributing to building Kona to what it is now?
I think, and that's really a good transition into the next story that I was going to tell. I think when we very first started, we ran into a pitfall that a lot of student entrepreneurs face. We thought we knew everything. We thought we had the solution to remote work and everything people needed. So we were building this kind of AI personality kind of bot that could teach you about all the things you need to know about your coworker. And that should be really exciting. We built out the preliminary product, put a lot of months into that, and then realized nobody wanted it. And so I think what was the biggest struggle for us was realizing how valuable it was to not know things. For me, I struggle with imposter syndrome, and it's definitely one of those things where I feel like I'm the least qualified person, and usually it's because I am. I'm usually the youngest in a room. I don't have a lot of work experience, none to be perfectly honest. And so trying to teach managers how to manage entire companies and teaching like huge Fortune 500 companies to like how they should be doing, I feel like that I'm not the person who should be called to do that. However, what we learned was that like learning is our greatest asset. The fact that we don't know, it makes us incredibly scrappy. And that's where the 550 remote manager interviews came from. It came from this like admittance to ourselves that we didn't know what we were doing, and that was a beautiful thing, and that we should really chase people who do and really chase the knowledge and wealth of knowledge that's out there. I think the biggest struggle was just trying to figure out how we could have the confidence to basically admit that we don't know something and then chase after that answer. And once we were able to kind of build that and realize it wasn't a weakness, that it brought everything that we have today.
That's incredible. And that's like the whole idea of imposter syndrome, and something that I've suffered with in my career as well. And it's like you said, I mean, you learn your expertise, don't you, through interacting with all those different people, all those 550 people. And I think what you've done is really bring something to market that, like I said, is needed. But not only that, I mean, it's to overcome that feeling of imposter syndrome it is a challenge, isn't it? And I think it's something that there are more people that suffer with that than probably admit. So in that sense,
for sure,
you've mentioned different levels. You've talked about your age and the fact that you haven't had any work experience. But I bet, right, you probably know more about remote teams and emotional intelligence than probably a lot of people in the world. Actually, you're probably one of the single most qualified people to speak about emotional intelligence. So inspiring to me, Corine, inspiring to me. In terms of in terms of a career challenge as well, tell me what you've had, because you mentioned, okay, you feel as though, or you've felt in the past as though you've had little work experience. What career challenges have you faced, or what's been the biggest career challenge for you?
I have a few answers, and so I'm trying to figure out which one's the best one. I think the first thing that comes to mind is trying to, at least right now, my career is all startups, and so that's pretty much all I know. But when I come to understand, like, the biggest challenge most recently that I've faced, it's OKRs and trying to set goals properly. I think, like, for me, I struggle a lot with prioritization. I get very overwhelmed with the mountain of things that I have to do, especially given that a lot of the things are mission critical. I handle all of growth, sales, and marketing. And so if I don't do what I need to be doing right away, then we won't have customers. We won't have kind of the lifeblood that needs to drive our products. Then we can actually start moving the product forward. And so I think, like, with that pressure comes sometimes a little bit of paralysis, where I feel like, in combination with imposter syndrome, in combination with the need to, like, learn rapidly, often feel a little bit paralyzed. I'm realizing now that with the OKR system, objectives, key results, it's something that's touted. I actually have the book from John Dewar behind me, but, like, it's just such a great system for systemizing a lot of these processes, making it so my co-founders hold me accountable and making it so we can really sharpen our focus. I think like being able to add focus to a lot of the mountain of events and kind of ideas that we have, it makes it so we're able to do exactly what needs to be done right away. And that's why we're able to make progress. And so I kind of have to admit to myself, I'm learning. It's okay to fail, but also just to not take those failures so personally. I think like for me, the paralysis comes from doing a bad job, doing the wrong thing, but really like, it's like nobody's done this before. So startups are a lot of experimentation, and that's the joy of it. That's the scariest part of it. And that's why we're here.
So cool. So cool. I love it. Inspiring. Telling you now, it's really, really inspiring. And I think as well, the other thing is, you mentioned earlier on that you initially built a product that nobody wanted. So to come from that point to where you are now is like, I think lots of people may have given up. Lots of normal people would have given up by now. So hats off to you. And
thank you.
You're fast emerging as a leader in this space. You are a leader in this space. In the remote space, but not just that, but in the emotional intelligence, in team culture, all that sort of thing. I can't wait to see where you're going to be in the next couple of year or so, to see where you're going to be. But I see you as a leader, and I, as I said, I take lots of inspiration from you. What would you say is the most important leadership lesson that you've learned?
Two. So first, I kind of want to finally speak to the research that you've been repeatedly touting and such. So as you mentioned, we've interviewed a lot of remote managers. The biggest leadership lesson that I got from those interviews was that trust is the most important thing to prioritize for any remote team. It's interesting because we often think that the things that make teams efficient are their ability to kick ass or their ability to knock to-dos off the table. They have the highest performers, etc. But if you look to research, the highest performing teams, Google did a great study in 2015 on this, is psychological safety. And you don't get psychological safety or the ability to basically make mistakes and admit when you make mistakes without a foundation of trust. When you're completely remote, this is like 10x. All the managers that we talk to, the ones that have been remote first, the GitLabs, the InVisions, etc., they succeed because they know that trust is something super precious and something that they need to constantly strive towards. And when a remote team has trust, when a remote manager knows that their teammates completely trust them, that they'll bring up issues as they come, that they don't really need to stress and kind of micromanage across different time zones, you have teams performing at a much higher caliber than an in-person team could perform because they're able to work asynchronously or tackle tasks and such without really needing to constantly sync up via meetings. It's amazing how you can be fully distributed and super efficient just by prioritizing the simple act of putting important things into the hands of another person. So that's the biggest kind of overall leadership lesson. The more recent one that's been kind of biting me and kind of really oh God, I wish I knew that sooner, was just the idea of radical candor. I'm sure you've heard it plenty mentioned and such, but Kim Scott's book, I've been reading it and kind of just soaking it all in. The idea that you need to care personally and challenge directly. It's something that for me is extremely scary. I always thought that if I challenge people, I'll be seen as a B word. I'll be seen as somebody who is too demanding, somebody who is off-putting, cold, harsh, all the things that a lot of women in power, unfortunately, are slotted into. But as a matter of fact, if you don't give feedback, you're actually holding your teammates back and you're not allowing everybody to grow in their best way. And so really trying to give proper feedback, that's been the most difficult leadership lesson that I've been learning and something that we're currently striving to do. Right now, my co-founders and I have this kind of sit-down session, actually inspired by some of my creative writing workshops at UCLA. So we basically sit at a table. Two people give feedback to one co-founder, and the one co-founder getting roasted or praised is not allowed to say anything. They're only allowed to take notes, sorry. And as you can imagine, that's a terrifying experience, but the way that opens conversation and doors and leaves us all feeling kind of warm and fuzzy inside is amazing. And it's all because of clear feedback. And we're not perfect at it, but we're definitely working on it. And just knowing that we're constantly asking for feedback and trying to improve, that's what drives our business.
Yeah, I'm similar to that as well. I'm quite a sensitive guy, to be honest with you. So there was a point in my career where I didn't take feedback too easily. I took it very personally. It was only later in my career that I began to realize that, the person that's giving me this feedback is giving it to me because they're trying to help me to get better. They're trying to help me to grow as an individual. And when I turned into the person who was giving the feedback, even that felt that was uncomfortable for me as well. I felt really uncomfortable giving feedback because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, you know?
Right.
But again, I think even if the feedback's a bit uncomfortable, I found that by giving this feedback, as uncomfortable as it felt for me, I could also see how it can help. And sometimes, I suppose, if it's feedback that you're giving that is uncomfortable, that kind of like, what do they say? It takes pressure to make diamonds. It takes, that bit of friction to sort of really smooth out the rough edges. So sometimes you have to have, I suppose, don't you, have those conversations that are a bit uncomfortable to get to the point where you want to be, right?
That, and also like talking to the very first kind of learning lesson, you need trust in order to give proper feedback. You can't just criticize somebody blindly. Like, that feedback comes from a place of care, and that means that you really need to build that personable relationship in order to succeed. And if you think about work, like, I don't think we normally think of work as a bunch of personable relationships. Like, I think for the longest time, professionalism and the kind of sit down at your cubicle, do your stuff and go at 5, like, that is a complete reshift. And so we're actually facing this huge revolution of a more empathetic, bring your whole person to work kind of movement. And it's really, really exciting.
I find it exciting as well. This is why I started this podcast, because I wanted to get this all out there and show people a different side to what the media's report, or a lot of the media's reporting, is that remote work is all about working from home, is all about just, people getting all sort of in their, at their home and just sort of keeping themselves. There's so much more to it. So love it. I really love it.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you've learned a lot over the past couple of years. I know you have, again, from those 550 plus conversations, plus all the sort of work that you've been doing. How, other than that, I mean, again, there's lots of sort of similarities between myself and you. And I got to a point where my learning suffered, actually, when I first started working remotely. Back in, I think it was 2008, 2009, my whole career suffered, actually, because I became really isolated. I was working remotely, didn't really sort of proactively reach out to people, and just became so sort of entrenched and so focused on the work I was doing. I realized that's not the way forward at all. So, and that's partly where the podcast was born. How do you continue to learn and stay up to date with what's going on?
I think there's two sides to learning that at least work really well for me. And so first is a very like independent kind of self-driven learning. That's like me diving into as many self-help, self-leadership kind of books as I can. I love Brene Brown. I love I don't know, my executive coach just recommends a bunch and I just eat it up. An English major at heart. So like reading is just always bringing a lot of joy and security, and like definitely is the fastest way that I retain information. The second thing is like under the kind of independent learning bucket is just like writing. I'm in charge of all of our content. And I think like it's one of those, like, in order to learn fastest, you should teach. In order to like learn, for me, being able to like articulate what a manager's best practice is inside a blog post, it constantly has to have me reviewing the kind of material and figuring out what am I trying to say? What do managers really need to know? And in effect, I kind of like read my own work and I'm like, oh, I should be applying this to my own like intern or my own team. And like, we should be putting these practices into action. So that's all the kind of self-learning. But truly, like, the reason why we have all these interviews is because our sales process and the kind of way we pitch strangers is the learning process. Like, we actually start with a user interview kind of format. It's kind of a sales qualifying technique, but more so just the ability to try to figure out, okay, is this person on the same wavelength as us? And if they're not, what can we learn from them? So we don't really waste any sort of conversation that we get on. When we have 15 minutes of a person's time, we're trying to use it to the fullest. And so if they agree that empathy in remote work is the best thing, then let's learn from them rapidly and eventually hone a kind of pitch where we're just singing to the choir. If they don't agree with us, what can we learn from them? How can we embody certain things into our product? Because we know we'll need to cross the chasm and get away from the beachhead of super creme de la creme managers and eventually move to normal managers who are just trying to get work done are overwhelmed and might not be thinking about their people as much. And so all conversations with people, I think like just striking up conversations and learning from people as best you can has been the second and probably largest source of our knowledge.
Yeah, so much so. It's probably the biggest thing for me. I'm honestly, I'm not the biggest, unless I can find something really interesting to talk about or somebody interesting to talk to, then I generally don't have that many conversations, but I just love this whole topic of remote work and meeting people like yourself. And like you said, talking, peer-to-peer learning is probably one of the biggest ways that I learn. So yeah, definitely on the same page there.
Definitely.
And yeah, so let's talk then about a bit more about Kona and a bit more about, you referred a bit to asynchronous work. This is going to be a learning experience for me as well, because I work remotely at the moment, but we work very much in synchronicity and asynchronous. The whole idea of asynchronous work it's going to blow up in the coming months and years. And I think lots of people are still trying to figure it out, trying to understand it, trying to figure out how to do it, the tools, all that sort of thing. So I think you can bring a lot to the table here. We're going to talk about just briefly the power of asynchronous workplace communication. Corine,
Sure.
What is the biggest struggle that you have found that remote managers face in 2021?
I'm like, I have all of their data just to the side here. The one struggle that they were mentioning was relationship building in isolation, but that seems very squishy. So allow me to share a few other statistics. In addition to those struggles, 70% of the managers we interviewed mentioned struggling with burnout or some sort of mental health issue. You can directly tie the kind of isolation that we've suffered through in the pandemic to the feelings of kind of burnout and not being able to kind of share how you're feeling, and as a result, having that kind of activity spiral. In addition, we also saw team sizes increase a lot. Team sizes actually doubled. We saw an average team size of 7.23 per manager. That's seven direct reports per every manager, 10 if you're on an engineering team. And so you have managers that are isolated, dealing with all this different kind of stress of just extenuating circumstance of the pandemic while still trying to manage a lot more teammates than normal. We also saw that folks are so desperate to get away from Zoom that a lot of them are moving towards asynchronous work. At least 60% of our interviewees were talking about how they're moving to more asynchronous practices, documentation, avoiding Zoom meetings, trying to reduce the amount of kind of instant replies, because that adds so much pressure and stress to work that's not really necessary. And so all this data together, I think when we can realize that remote work is so much more than just working from home, it's about people and prioritizing people's needs and lives and all the background items that are happening behind their Zoom screen, we can realize that remote work shouldn't operate like this. We shouldn't be stuck in our offices and not able to move. It's not a kind of isolated thing naturally. It's just the fact that you are location independent, and how can you work around that? And so I think, to tie it all to the front, asynchronous work really is the answer to how we can have the best of both worlds. The ability to not rely on a ton of synchronous meetings, and the ability to answer a message as you see fit, much like you respond to an email. It's nothing new, but it's definitely something transformational, because then you can have time at 3 to pick up your kids from school, and you can make sure that you can take your dog for a walk and actually go outside a few times a day. You can cook dinner and actually have a healthy lifestyle that balances family and friends and all these things that we claim as work-life balance, while still not having to go into an office and while still being able to get your best work done with the best people you know. And it's something that's different. It's something that's scary. But if we're going to be actually tackling a remote future, not just hybrid, but a remote future, we need to talk about asynchronous.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd second that. And yeah, you would think it's something that's brand new. I think asynchronous has been around for God knows how long. I think it seems new because, like you said, it's now being pushed to the fore even more. It's been, people are trying to, I think people are actually stumbling upon asynchronous work, and they're trying to think to themselves, well, okay, so I've got these different things to do, and I've got to be able to organize my team in this way. Well, they're actually stumbling upon it maybe because they're figuring out that the synchronicity doesn't work, and that they need some other solution. Right. Is that? Do you think that's the key?
I think it's the aspect that in office workspaces don't translate very well to remote work. And so all the things that you rely on, the shoulder taps, water cooler conversations, the like meetings where you're just sitting next to your coworker jotting down notes, you can't really translate it perfectly to remote. And if you try to, eventually you'll realize that you have a lot more burnout and Slack fatigue and Zoom fatigue and all these different kinds of platforms that all need to be on at the same time for you to replicate what you had in the office. When the answer truly is, let's change it for a remote world and like actually work towards more documentation, work towards smarter communication. We made Kona not a video chat kind of bump for a reason. We wanted to make sure that we weren't adding to the onslaught of Zoom. Kona check-ins all happen via Slack, and frankly, they can all happen whenever a team wants it to. We have settings for different time zone features. The team at HubStaff uses it across 19 different time zones. And so like the ability to create more asynchronous flexible tools and tools that kind of basically promote every single way of working, it's really important. And it can basically foster a much healthier lifestyle for everyone involved.
No, it sounds good. And I think one of the things that's bubbling around a bit now, and it's getting more and more popular, I'm getting lots of communication from people who are part of trying to improve asynchronous work. And they tend to be people who are working for like instant video apps. So the ones that are where you can have these threaded videos and pass them
for sure
around your team. What do you think of those? Are those things that you would see as a credible tool for asynchronous work?
Oh, definitely. Like Loom saves lives, I think. The ability to kind of just record your own screen and point out what you're trying to talk about, it saves an entire meeting pretty much. I will say, though, that for bonding, which I think is usually the thing that we lose in a completely asynchronous environment, like asynchronous in a lot of ways when not practiced correctly tilts towards more isolation, tilts towards you just working in a silo. That's where you kind of need bonding opportunities that are not synchronous, are not hosted on Zoom, are not a happy hour, but still create the same level of trust that you would in those environments. And that's the use case we're trying to tackle. But yeah, I'm not trying to shit on our little video recording things. We use them all the time and they're fantastic.
I must say I do like them, and I think I like the idea, like you said, something like Loom, where you can literally just record something. In fact, I was listening into my to my friend. We were in a coffee shop, and the business he works in has been forced basically to work remotely. So they're completely, it's pretty much a mess, to be honest with you, in terms of how they go about their meetings, etc. And I think to myself, you could have just, that meeting that you spent the last 30 minutes, 45 minutes doing, you could have done that in like 20 minutes, or you could have done it and shared it with your colleagues, and you wouldn't have had to waste all of that time, you know? So yeah, I'm all for video as well. Okay, so what's happening now, I guess, is that remote work is here to stay, and I think we're on the cusp of something really special, I think. And I think there are people that are realizing there seems to be different camps forming. So there's people who are all for hybrid, there's people for a complete return to the office, and there are people who want remote as well. So kind of three or four different camps, I would say. But I feel as though there are people that are being given almost like an ultimatum as to whether they go back into the office or whether they, spend a couple of days in the office here and there. And I think it's causing a lot of friction in terms of, people are being put under pressure, I guess, as to what choices they take. And in some cases, people are saying, actually, no, I'm not going back to the office. I'm going to find another job in a remote company. What can remote managers do about the great resignation side of things?
Definitely. I was just looking at an article, and I'm sure you've seen this fact: 4 million Americans quit their jobs in April. Like, that's insane. And a lot of them have been pushed by, like you said, crazy. This ultimatum to decide: are you going to be with us or against us? Are you going to be working remotely, or are you going to have 2 or 3 days in the office? I can understand where companies are coming from. They're trying to create alignment with their teams. They want to make sure that you don't have someone in the office when somebody's necessarily at home, and then that person at home gets left out. But I think it misses the crucial aspect that remote is meant to be flexible, and it's meant to allow folks to have options. And what you need to do is encourage better kind of hybrid practices, not necessarily one set hybrid practice. Unfortunately, companies are losing their talent. You have folks that under this ultimatum have, during COVID, already moved to a location where it would require maybe 2 hours of commute just to get to their in-person office, where they have kids. It doesn't make sense to waste 4 hours in traffic when they could be tutoring their kid in Spanish. And so when you make coworkers and employees decide, do I choose my family and my lifestyle, or do I choose the company? It's obvious which one's going to win out. And so, unfortunately, folks are being put in this awful position. As a manager, what you can do is make sure that you prioritize people. It's as simple as that. We basically found out by doing a little bit of kind of perusing and research that a lot of people are resigning because, again, they have reevaluated priorities. They see that there's an increased need for talent. If you're not going to prioritize me as a person, I mean, this other company that's your competitor totally will. And there's also just kind of this aspect of millennials who have been trapped in their offices and homes for so long, who feel like their 20s are literally speeding past them, that just want to live and they want to be encouraged to live to their fullest. And so when you have all those kind of mixed things as a manager, you need to be protecting your teams by figuring out what are the kind of cultural aspects that are just shooting our talent in the foot. What are we trying to force people into that really don't need to happen? Do we need to be on in-person meetings this entire time? Can I force a little bit more documentation for our team in particular? Can I add processes that add for more flexibility and meet my teammates basically where they're at? Also, like, are you able to basically be transparent? I think like a lot of hybrid and remote employees feel the pressure to show up to the office because they're afraid they're going to miss something. But if you can bake in a lot more transparent practices, documenting everything, recording meetings, making sure that everybody is able to track down the conversations that are having in the office, you won't have certain satellite employees that just feel like they're on the moon where everybody else is converging here down on Earth. It also helps to make sure that you're trying to pay attention to PTO and the kinds of gratitude practices, and making sure that every single person in your office is recognized, but also being monitored for, I guess, their engagement. Like, is this person who is remote burning out rapidly, maybe they haven't taken any PTO because they feel like they're constantly having to catch up. Those kind of situations are how you lose your talent really rapidly. So making sure that you're able to stay on top of how is this person feeling? Am I supporting them? And am I supporting kind of their entire holistic view of their world in remote that I can't necessarily see in the office? I think those are really important questions to ask. And finally, I think like knowing who is about to leave and kind of just making sure that you're providing them the best experience. If somebody's already, if they already have one foot out the door, it doesn't really make sense to stop them, but it can be helpful to figure out how you can learn from that one person to try to avoid the waterfall effect of having the rest of your talent ditch you because one person's left. So just a few ideas and kind of tips and such. We have like a full blog post on it. I'm sure you can share it in the notes too, that says it a little bit more eloquently. Yeah.
I definitely want to share that blog post. Definitely do. And somebody actually, I was looking at my LinkedIn news feed. I can't remember the name of the CEO, but he was arguing this point as well about how people are being forced to do this, that, and the other, and go, put their name into one camp or another, the hybrid camp or the remote camp or the in-office camp. And his simple sort of solution was, why don't, as a manager, as a CEO, why don't you just ask your team what they want to do, what works for them best?
Exactly.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, there are, I think it was Nick Francis I interviewed from Help Scout a while back, and he said, and I kind of see why this is the case. He said that if you're going to do remote, you do it, you're all in. Everybody, you go remote first or nothing, basically. And I can completely see why that is, because like you said, there's kind of scenarios. If you're going to go hybrid, there's going to be issues there with people who think they're missing out on things, or, it just becomes a bit messier, as you kind of alluded to in what you were just saying there so eloquently. So, yeah, there's a lot to learn. I can't wait to see what the next year has in store, because if you've got somebody who has got the talent and has got the skills and they have a choice between joining a remote team that's going to support them and allows, like you said, allows them to sort of do the side stuff that they like doing, and a business that is forcing you to go into the center of whichever CBD you live in. I wonder what they're going to choose, but it's going to be exciting to see how that all develops. But listen, let's talk a bit about Kona and how Kona can help remote team culture, because culture is everything. I think it's even more important in a remote team. I mean, lots of businesses talk about culture, and we do this, that, and the other. And again, with being in a co-located team, you can skate around the culture, but you don't have to be totally embedded in the culture. Whereas a remote team, you have to be, again, all in or nothing. But what is it about Kona that is helping with remote team culture? Tell us about that, Corine.
Definitely. So Kona is birthed out of all of those conversations we had with remote managers. And as a result, every single kind of product detail and feature has been built towards the use cases and kind of testimonials that we've gotten from these managers. We've heard, you can't tap somebody's shoulder while remote. I have no idea what their body language is, like whether or not they're happy, sad, glad, etc. I don't know how, I don't know how to hang out with my teammates without burning them out. We're constantly trying to do Among Us games, but we're sick of the game and we don't want to see each other's faces anymore. We see each other all day. And also just like the energy and ease of conversation. Like, I can't wait to return to the office because then I'll finally be able to connect with my teammates. All these kinds of testimonials, we baked into Kona and basically created a emotional wellness platform where every single day Kona will send you a check-in. How are you feeling? You mark red, yellow, green, you add a line of context, you pick an emoji, and that's it. Very simple solution with really powerful results. So it's shared within the team. Immediately, given that it's non-anonymized, teammates are suddenly faced with the, oh shit, like I actually have to be honest with how I'm feeling. And if it's a trusting environment, they take to it right away. They say, I'm yellow, I stepped in dog shit today. Let's talk about that. And it's hilarious because you start to inspire conversations in Slack that you would never see. You would never post into random to your entire company, this is what's happening to me, this hilarious thing, because it could be potentially really embarrassing. But with your team, these are the kinds of conversations you'd be having at a water cooler, over lunch, etc. And these moments of vulnerability and kind of just human experience, they really inspire a lot more trust among teammates. So just the ability to share, this is how I'm doing, how are you doing? It allows communication to be improved a lot. You can see, oh, this person they have a Google Calendar integration, so we can see a horrifying number of hours of meetings. So this person's in 12 hours of meetings and their kid is sick. Today is not the day to bother them with a tiny task that I need from them. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cancel the meeting I had with them so they can have a little bit more time to breathe. Or, hey, like this person is wide open and it's great. It's a great time to talk to them about this or that. Let's hop into a quick Zoom call. The ability to add visibility to how folks are doing and how folks can be interacted with, it suddenly makes it so you realize like you don't actually need an office for that. You just need some eyes on the ground, some virtual sixth sense there. In addition, for managers, of course, every single data point is tracked. And so suddenly managers can say, where they were saying, oh, I don't know whether or not my team's burning out. I can only kind of pay attention to the tickets they send in and how productive they were each week. And maybe I'll have one conversation with them during our one-on-one. Now they have daily snapshots of health. They can see, oh, my entire team is yellow. It's time for us to take some sort of break. Whereas before it would take maybe a quarterly review for them to realize, oh yeah, in like week 7, we had that kind of burnout situation. I'll know next time if I start to sense that maybe I'll dodge it in time. So that kind of live reporting, the ability to build trust, that's all the things that we've baked into Kona. We're still actively creating more features, and we're actually going to be launching like a new version of Kona on Product Hunt soon with kind of some new and improved kind of things. It's the first time we've kind of announced that, so that's exciting. Yeah, it's been it's been the work of a lifetime and just really, really fun to be able to make people happier in a remote setting. It's just a huge joy.
And what kind of feedback you've been getting? Because by the sounds of it, it sounds like Kona is something that uses things that you and I would use in WhatsApp conversations, or the emojis and the kind of like almost like a traffic light system there, where you've got the sort of those different things there, and it sounds pretty intuitive to use. How's your feedback been going?
For sure. So right now we're piloting with some awesome companies, Aircall, Medium. We had a pilot with Asana. It's just the idea that you can actually do all these different things, the emojis, the kind of sharing feelings and such in a work context. Somehow it's very revolutionary and actually opens a lot of doors. We see folks like Happy Money talking about how they're building psychological safety, and they actually see a lot more open conversations happening at work. It increases collaboration. We see folks at Aircall being able to reduce the number of stand-ups and kind of daily check-ins they have because they already have the context. We realize that so many of our meetings are literally built towards relationship building and built towards getting a face, seeing somebody, asking how they're doing. And if you can move some of that towards asynchronous, save some folks on Zoom burnout, and also get the same kind of information, then when you do finally see them face to face, kind of like how you constantly know what your relatives are up to on Facebook, you kind of already know, oh, let's talk about this. Like, how was whatchamacall's graduation and how are you doing in this aspect? And you have a lot higher quality conversations instead of the blank stares. How are you doing? I guess I'm good. And you just kind of work off of that. So Kona just allows for, we're not trying to replace human interaction. We're just trying to facilitate it in a remote setting.
And I think it's all of the things that you mentioned there in terms of the, I've experienced it myself where I've been in that meeting where the managers ask me, so how are you getting on? Oh, and then he's like, oh, I didn't realize, Alex, because you hadn't asked me before. You hadn't asked me until my meeting. So, how would you know? So if you can have that sort of continual conversation around those different things, I think it's something that is needed. So, I mean, we are going to be keeping an eye on you, Corine, and keeping an eye on what Kona is doing, because, as I said, I think it's definitely one to watch. I'm really excited to kind of keep in touch with you to see how you're getting on with Kona. What are you planning any sort of like, because you've been working so hard for the last couple of years, you must have some sort of holiday planned or some sort of staycation planned somewhere.
Thankfully, you're right. I've been doing a lot of traveling. So now that the pandemic's opening up a little bit more, I literally just got back from Austin, Texas. I'll be headed to Catalina Island, New York, and Hawaii very soon, which is very exciting. And thankfully, I'm remote, so I can take my work with me wherever I go. So I'm just excited to be location independent, which is awesome.
But you are going to have a break, aren't you, Corine? Surely.
Yes, Hawaii is going to be, it's not going to be a laptop on the beach. It's just going to be me spread out on the beach, just sunglasses on and just flipping over occasionally. It'll be awesome.
Nice. Well, listen, stay in touch with the Remote Work Life podcast, please, Corine, because as I said, we want to keep up to date with what you're doing. We're going to put some details in the show notes as well. If you're interested, well, I think I'd suggest you go and look at Kona. You can catch them at Hey Kona. That's HEYKONA.com, and follow Corine on LinkedIn as well. It's Corine Tan. She's the co-founder of Kona. Corine, it's been great having you here, and all the best going forward.
Thank you so much, Alex. You're such a joy to talk to. And thank you for doing all that you do for the remote work community. We really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you.